I'm one of many of John's assistants that he's had over the years. And I was an assistant 2007, I think, for a year. One of the best and most important experiences of my life. He's the one who introduced me to the Studio Potter Journal, which I am now the editor for, and I was just talking this morning with Anat Shifton, who was my MFA professor, and he's the one who encouraged me to go to grad school and the reason why I ended up there. So he's been a really powerful influence in my life, and thank you to Nsika for inviting me to talk about him today. It's quite an honor, particularly as a representative of all the mentees and students that he's had throughout his life. So, if I just press the green button, will this advance? Okay, and then it'll just keep going if it's set. Okay. So, the images will just run while I speak. John Glick owned and operated Plumtree Pottery in Farmington Hills, Michigan for more than 50 years. For many who are familiar with his work, his name conjures visions of thick, layered glazes that dress grand and strong ceramics forms, with a lightness of brushwork and depth of color unsurpassed in American ceramics. For those less familiar with John's early career, he was introduced to crafts in high school and pursued ceramics at Wayne State University, and then Cranbrook Academy of Art, studying under Maya Gretel, and graduating with an MFA in 1962. Afterward, he was inspired by potters in Germany, where he was stationed after being drafted into the Army. Returning to Michigan in 1964, he established Plumtree Pottery, where he made pots for more than 50 years. Over the course of his career, he earned 2 prestigious Louis Comfort Tiffany Awards, 2 National Endowment for the Arts Fellowships, and a Michigan Foundation for the Arts Governor's Award. His work was featured at a White House luncheon organized by former First Lady Rosalind Carter in 1977. And Joan Mondale, the wife of former President Walter Mondale, owned a set of his dishes. Many thousands of pots later, and after a successful retrospective show at Cranbrook in 2016, John embarked on a new phase of his career, which included downsizing his studio and relocating to California with his beloved wife, Susie Simons, to be near their family. Less than a year after that, John's health failed him, and he died on April 6, 2017. John was prolific in everything he did: potting, writing, kiln building, engineering tools and machines, and most importantly, mentoring. For more than 30 assistants whom John has mentored over the course of his career, his name summons memories of dancing to blaring music around glazed buttons, inspecting and then drooling over the juiciness of a single drip of crystal-laden glaze from a salt firing, or returning to the studio some afternoon to find a gigantic spoonful of peanut butter and chocolate patiently waiting on the wheelhead to be gobbled up in delight. In 2015, Studio Potter Journal invited a selection of his assistants to write about their time at Plumtree Pottery, which was in its final year of operation. Their words are a tribute to his legacy and give a glimpse of the many lasting gifts that John and time spent working at his Michigan pottery have given to all his assistants, and by extension to their studios, homes, families, friends, and their students. Here are some of their words. Paul Young was an assistant from 89 to 91, and he says, "My time at Plumtree Pottery was crucial to my growth as a potter and a person. Back at the pottery for an open house recently, I smiled to see a group of young artists gathered around John, just, quote, kicking the bricks, as he was fond of saying." Kristen Kiefer was assistant 96 to 97. She says, "The most important thing John taught me is how to play. You can't work alongside a potter and a glazer such as John without being inspired to shake off fear and explore. His energy and positivity are infectious. Without exaggeration, every day that I'm in my studio, I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to learn from him." Mark Cole was an assistant 01 to 02. As I've moved on to be a mentor myself, I have come to rely on the ideals John lives by. I know that there are many ways of being a role model, but I'm very grateful to know a really good one, the one at Plumtree Pottery. Jay Dion was an assistant 2007 to 2008. He says, "John showed me what it means to be free, to know in your heart what your hands can do. This was the true education that John gave to his residents. He wasn't teaching me how to glaze. He was teaching me how to be myself, how to work hard and follow my path, to be true to myself in my craft." Julia Walder was his last assistant, 2012 to 2014. She was lucky to be there 2 years. She says, "John's conviction and his clarity about exactly what he was doing and why is incredibly heartening to me as a young artist in what I found to be a cynical world. He operates from a place of confidence, joy, and excitement that gives him complete freedom to experiment, and he has been sharing that place with young people for the better part of 4 decades. John Glick's pots, words, teaching, and love are gifts that hundreds, thousands probably, of us will carry with us. And though it's, of course, cliche to say the world is a far better place because of him. The slides will just play now for a little while, and when we get to the last slide, I'll talk a little bit about his website and where you can find some more information. Maybe while these are going, I wasn't really going to add anything so personal, but while these play, it may be interesting to know. So John passed away in April, and the January before that, my father passed away, and it was just one of those things that was like, what is happening in the world? Because John had been so like a father figure. And I remember when my parents came to visit John's studio when I was there, and my father was really fascinated by John's studio and his way of life and the workshop and his photography set up upstairs and the kilns and the showroom and just this life that I don't think had occurred to my parents that anyone had. And then when my father retired, of course, he had always been doing things with his hands, which is probably where I got the influence and the bug to do things with my hands, to make things. But while he was there, then after he was there and after he retired from a career in finance, he used the basement of my childhood home to set up a woodworking studio. And he got all the equipment and set it up cleanly with a ventilation system and all the safety equipment, and it was just like John. And though I never talked to my father directly about it, I am convinced that his visit to Plumtree influenced his decision to pursue woodworking as a second career, basically. And after his visit, I remember him talking about just being fascinated by John in his studio. And so it was quite a blow last year to lose both of those people, but But they both, John was, why I had such a great relationship with him was probably because he was a mentor, but like a father in a lot of ways, silly and funny, and just enough guidance, not too much. And I'm sure that the rest of his assistants had similar but different experiences. So this says slide 173 of 248, which is interesting because now I can't really tell where we're at because there are 100 slides. So at the end, there'll be some websites that you might want to snap a picture of or take down. I'll go ahead and talk about a few of those, and when we get to this slide, you can record those. The first one is plumtreepottery.com, John's website. It's a wealth of information and images of his work, and it's still being maintained. And also, I think there are links on there to 2 memorial services for him that are on YouTube, or you can Google YouTube, Google his name on YouTube, or search his name on YouTube to find those. One was in Michigan and one was in California. And Jay Dion, who I quoted, had the most beautiful and moving eulogy for him. He had a retrospective show at Cranbrook in 2016, and you can go to cranbrookartmuseum.org on his exhibition page, and a beautiful catalog was produced for that show with the most amazing images, really vivid images of his work and his glazing. So I'd recommend seeing that. Also, importantly, an endowed student scholarship was set up at Penland in John's name, and the goal was to raise $35,000 within 5 years for this endowment, and it was fully funded within less than a year. So that was really wonderful, and I'm sure that if you wanted to continue to contribute to that fund, Penland would be glad for you to do that. We all would be glad for you to do that. Also on studiopotter.org, we have John's author page. John was one of the first contributors to Studio Potter Journal and was the person who introduced me to the journal, like I said, and his articles, particularly on body care and health, are some of the most widely read and referenced articles, and on his author page, we are working to make all his articles available, and there's some there. Here's the websites that I'm talking about now. Also, at kieferceramics.com, Kristen has recently begun revisiting John's writings and teachings on ergonomics and health in the studio, and is beginning to compile some more information on that. And I know that both her and I, and probably some other of his assistants, have embraced the standing at your pottery wheel and some other healthful ways to work in the studio. So finally, I'd just like to thank NCECA again, and I'd like to thank John's wife, Susie, and his tech guru, Phyllis Evans, and his longtime friend and designer, Rusty Eismont, for their help with compiling these images for you today. So thank you very much.